As you can tell, we're going to be decluttering eyeshadow palettes today. We're going to go ahead and just get started. We're going to start with my Pat McGrath palettes. This first one is Divine Rose. It is my absolute favorite palette of the three that I have. These are just the perfect colors. My favorite colors is this one right here. And then I also really like this one. See those swatches? Beautiful colors, really great for one and dones. And also the mattes on these are absolutely beautiful. So I'll for sure be keeping the Divine Rose. My second favorite is Moonlit Seduction. So I'm going to be for sure keeping this since it's my second favorite Pat McGrath palette. Some people didn't like this palette because the special shades were a little bit different, but honestly that doesn't bother me. My favorite shades, of course, are going to be like these brown shades are my favorite. This also has a really pretty like topper shade that I like. Just very beautiful shimmery shades. We'll be keeping this for sure. My third Pat McGrath palette is Bronze Seduction. As you may have noticed, I really thoroughly enjoy bronzy shades, so I thought I would love a palette called Bronze Seduction. However, a lot of these shades aren't actually that bronzy. My favorite shades is, of course, this one, and this one, and this one. Even though the Bronze Seduction isn't my favorite Pat McGrath palette, I'm still going to be keeping it. Rose Quartz, I purchased this when I was trying to be a little bit more experimental with my eyeshadow. I was really drawn to the pinks and purples in this palette because as far as color is concerned, they're the easiest to use. However, I've had this palette for years and years and I don't use it. So at this point, I'm going to be decluttering the Rose Quartz palette. ABH was my introduction to like higher end luxury, high performing eyeshadows. I had the Soft Glam palette, which I decluttered earlier this year. Sultry is the only one I have left. Unfortunately, this has been discontinued and you can't purchase it, which is a shame because it's a beautiful palette. However, I have had this for years at this point, and the shadows just aren't performing as well. They're just a little bit dry and they don't have as much payoff as I would like. And to be honest, I've just kind of moved away from the ABH formula. So I'm going to be decluttering this. Next, we're going to talk about the Persona Identity palette. I waited so long to purchase this palette because for some reason I felt like it was overpriced. Because I don't know why I thought that, but I did for so many years. And I finally bit the bullet not too long ago and I purchased this. This is an absolutely perfect eyeshadow palette for anybody with brown eyes. All of these colors are absolutely lovely. The formula is just so beautiful. It's pretty much perfection. The only thing I wish is that I wish the mirror went back all the way, but I will be keeping this one. Sticking with Persona, I have the Identity 2 palette. This is just the colorful palette. This is the same beautiful formula. Obviously, it's a colorful palette. I don't generally wear colorful eyeshadow very often, but I do like to have one palette in my collection that does have more colorful shades. And this formula, again, is wonderful, so I'm going to be keeping this palette. I do have a couple of like higher end luxury palettes. This one is from Dior. It is the shade New Look, and it's just the perfect Holly palette. Very neutral, very easy. You're definitely only going to get one or two looks from this. This color is amazing. So pretty. Will for sure be keeping this Dior eyeshadow palette. So this is my second high-end luxury palette, which is from Charlotte Tilbury. I got this a couple holiday seasons ago. It is the Celestial Pearl Luxury Palette of Pearls. This is one of those palettes that you can't really make an eyeshadow look with. You can top your eyeshadows with it, or you have to just use it in conjunction with another palette. Honestly, I don't really love this. I never use this. However, I'm going to be doing an entire video on Charlotte Tilbury in the near future, so I have to hold on to it for just a little bit longer. This palette is so underrated. It is from Ilia. It is their Cool Nude palette. This is my go-to travel palette. It's a perfect size. It has a nice mirror. It opens all the way. This is the cool version. There's also a warm version of this. It's just absolute perfection, and I will for sure be keeping it. Rowan and I have had a rather tumultuous relationship. I've decluttered quite a few products from them. This particular eyeshadow palette, the 1111, has gone through multiple declutters and made it through by the skin of its teeth. This formula is fun. It's rather, flaky. So it has kind of like a chunky look on the eye. So you kind of have to be wanting to go for that. These two colors, I love. These two colors, I don't use. So I'm keeping this palette for the two shades on this end. And as I said, I'm keeping it. I'm not going to be decluttering it. Not quite yet. I have a little bit more time to use this palette. And once it's dried out, then I will declutter it. I don't own very many drugstore eyeshadow palettes. I just don't prefer them. However, I have this Jungle Lights from Flower Beauty. It has made it through several declutters. I really love this foiled, chunky formula. However, I only like this one shade. And this is a rather large palette to keep for just one shade. So I'm going to be decluttering it. This Revlon That's a Dub eyeshadow palette is my only other drugstore palette. And this formula, if you can even get it still, is absolutely perfect. It's the best drugstore formula I think I've ever used. I don't think I'm ever getting rid of this palette. You can see that these colors are very neutral, which means they're perfect for me. This color is perfection. This color is perfection. This color is perfection. I don't want you to fall in love with it too much if you can't actually get it. I don't want to be mean, but I'm definitely not getting rid of it. This is my only mid-level palette. It is from M Cosmetics. It is the Divine Skies palette. Again, it's one of those palettes that doesn't open all the way. This formula is okay. This palette is okay. I never reach for it. I don't travel with it. And I'm going to be decluttering it. These are all the Natasha Denona palettes that I currently have in my everyday makeup, meaning I'm not testing. So we're going to go through these and decide which ones I'm going to keep and which ones I'm going to declutter. We're going to start with the Natasha Denona Glam palette. This is one of her midi palettes. As you can see, it's a lot of neutrals. Definitely great for glam looks, like if you wanted to do a smoky eye, but also good for everyday. Lots of one and done shades in here as well. I don't reach for this very often because I have the mini glam and then I have another palette that you'll see later that is very similar. However, I do want to keep this one because it is a great arsenal of neutral shades and the formula is wonderful and it's not that old, so I will be keeping this. The reason why I don't reach for the glam palette that often is because I have this special palette from Natasha Denona. It is the Ayana palette. It was a BoxyCharm exclusive. BoxyCharm doesn't exist anymore. It is now Ipsy, so I'm pretty sure you can't get this. Maybe on some third-party sites like eBay or Poshmark or something. But this is the one that I reach for. It has the perfect matte shades that I can get a great look, and then these two shimmery shades are just beautiful. So I tend to reach for this when I'm looking for something that I would typically get from the Glam palette. I also like to travel with it because it's not too big, it's not too small. It's just like the perfect size. So I'm definitely going to be keeping this one. Since we're on the Glam train, this is the mini Glam palette. Now the interesting thing about this is that this palette has color names on it, whereas the actual Glam palette has like eye locations. So it's kind of hard to tell if there are dupes. From what I can tell though, these colors are unique. There's not a lot of crossover between this palette and the actual Glam palette. So while I don't reach for this very often, I'm going to be keeping it for now. This was another BoxyCharm special. This is the Peak palette. I'm not sure what possessed me to even get this because I hate these colors. And as you've probably guessed, I will be decluttering this. The Mini Metropolis is another fail of a Natasha Denona palette. The colors of this looked a little bit less intense and a little, not cool, but cooler in the promotional materials. So when I saw how orange this was, I was disappointed. Also, the formula just isn't as great. The one color that I like is this shimmery color, but it's not a shade that I use very often. And this matte isn't terrible, but I'm not going to hold on to this just for those two shades, so I'm going to be decluttering it. There was a point in my life where I was wanting to collect almost all of the Natasha Denona shades, even ones that I knew I wouldn't use. This is the Mini Nude palette. Again, this is just an extremely warm palette. I never reach for these colors because I have a cool skin tone, and when I put colors like this on my eyes, I look sick. So I will be decluttering this palette. This is my last Natasha Denona palette, and it is the last palette in this declutter. It is the Cupid palette. This is another palette that I picked up from BoxyCharm for like a pretty good steal. I thought I was gonna like this. However, I don't need this palette or these colors because I don't use them. I am just not putting these particular bruise shade colors on my eyes. So I will be decluttering this. These are the eyeshadow palettes that I'm going to be decluttering. The estimated retail value of these eyeshadow palettes is $225. And you may be wondering why I'm sharing that number. It's not to like brag or boast or be like I can throw away or give away $225 worth of eyeshadow products. It's just so that I can understand that I am wasting my money by buying eyeshadow palettes that I am not using. Because this is money that I could have put towards something else. It's money that I could have in my savings account or use toward a vacation. And so it's a teaching thing for me as well as for you to help you understand why it's important to make careful decisions when you're purchasing makeup. I'm not sure what other declutters that I'm going to be doing next, but I will link the rest of my declutter series for you to watch should you like to.